Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. My name is Sarah, and today we'll be talking about a book, Sands by Hugh Howey. Now, many of you guys know Hugh as the guy who wrote the Wool trilogy. I have not read that trilogy, but honestly, going by this book, I probably won't. I don't like this book very much, and in this review and discussion, I'm gonna talk about why. The first thing that you should know about this book is that it's neither a plot-driven book nor a character-driven book. It's a setting-driven book. The entire focus of this novel is entirely around the setting. Now, the setting of this novel is our world in a dystopian future. War has been raging for so long, the earth has turned to sand. And there's people in this universe called sand divers, people who can dive into the sand like water and retrieve ancient treasures from our time. Stuff that's left buried under the sand. This book follows the story of a family just trying to survive in this wasteland. The family composes of a mother, a daughter, and 3 sons. The father has gone missing years ago. The youngest son was actually born after he disappeared. The father used to be a noble, in fact, and the 2 oldest children can remember that time, but none of the other children do. They remember the time as a noble, behind the walls before the sand got to them. And their mother took them away for unexplained reasons, and they were forced to live in the sand wastelands. Now, I want to talk about the characters of this book, because that is what the story follows. The mother of the family's name is Rose, and she runs a brothel. She was forced to take up the job after her husband left her. Originally, it was just a bar, a place to get some money. And then she started running out of money, and she was forced to start working herself. Her children hate her, but she has to bring home the money, even though the children have been supporting themselves for years. The eldest child's name is Victoria. She's one of the best sand divers in this universe, but she left her family years ago so she can pursue her job and to leave her mother behind after she got attacked at the brothel. Now, Victoria can go down deeper than any sand diver in this universe, and she can do this because she hides air tanks in the sand along the way. She's rather well known for this fact, and people think she can go down hundreds of meters with only a single breath. But no one knows her secret. Yeah, she can go far, but she's kind of cheating the system. The eldest son's name is Palmer. He's actually the first character we're introduced to in this book, but he's kind of missing for a huge chunk of it right after his chapter's end. Now, I don't want to go too into detail about what happens. Palmer gets sucked into a situation because he just wants to go home and help support his family, but he also wants to make it up in the world. And his brothers kind of distrust him for that. He goes off and disappears for weeks on end, only to come back with a couple coins. Now, the main son in this family's name is Connor. He is being forced to take care of the youngest of the family, Rob. Connor isn't a sand diver. He couldn't pass the test to become a sand diver. He's known as a sissyfoot. A sissyfoot are people who carry sand away from findings that sand divers find. He's a little ashamed of this, but he does his best. He gets his water, he gets his coins, and he gets food for the family. Now, the youngest of this family's name is Rob, as I mentioned before. Rob is just this naive child. He wants to hear stories about his father who he's never met. His father left after their mother became pregnant, and he doesn't know anything better. Now, at the beginning of this novel, Palmer is hired by a group of bandits to go and find this legendary place called Darvan. He's kind of worried about it, though. He and his friend have been hired to hike into this wasteland with these people who are known for killing and hunting and pillaging. But he does the job anyways, because he realizes that this could get him up in the world. This could get his family support they need. So he goes down into the sand. Stuff happens that I don't want to talk about because that will spoil the book. And he's essentially left down there. He can't get back up. He's run out of air. He's sent to die, buried beneath the sand. He finds the ancient civilization, but he can't return to the surface. The siblings in this novel have a tradition. Every year, on the anniversary of their father's disappearance, they hike out to go camping in no man's land, and they tell stories about their father. But slowly, the siblings have stopped going. Victoria stopped going years ago, and Palmer hasn't shown up for the last 2. So it just leaves Connor and Rob to hike into the wilderness and tell stories about a father that one of them doesn't even remember. Now, I mentioned before about sand divers, and sand divers are kind of glazed over, even though it's a huge part of this novel. We don't properly understand how they do what they do. They talk about suits and wires and electricity, but it's not really explained how it works. And it doesn't fit in with the setting that is the main focus of this novel. We don't understand how this technology can exist in this world that can barely survive by itself, can barely get water. Now, this book has a lot of problems, and I do want to discuss that. For one, it has 53 chapters, and it's only a 300-page novel. Some of these chapters are only 2 pages long, and I feel like these chapters could be fused together. A 2-page long chapter follows the same story as the chapter before it, and it makes no sense to separate them. They don't tell a different story, and they don't have their own beat to them. It's just a continuous beat, and they're split up like the author just wrote a chapter a day. That causes a lot of very weird pacing problems, and also kind of destroys any tension this book even hoped of having. Like I said before, there's not much plot to this story, and you kind of get a hint of what might be the plot at page 100, and then you find out that's not actually the plot at all. This book doesn't have tension. It doesn't give you a reason to continue reading. I liked the setting of this novel, but that's kind of all this novel was. A chance for this author to describe a world that was in his mind, but not give us a reason to read it. The end of this book actually has no real conclusion to it. It finishes the story that sets up in the last part of this book, because this book is split up into 4 different parts. But that's kind of it. It wraps up the final part of this book, but not what it sets up beforehand. Like I said, there's no tension in this book, and there's no real conclusion to it. Overall, I give this book a 6 out of 13. There's really no reason to read it. You want to hear a good setting, a good place to put your future novel, an idea that you could use? Sure, read the back of the book. Read the first 30 pages. That kind of tells you everything you need to know. Again, there's no reason to read this book. It has a really soft cover, and I really like holding it. But when I'm holding it, that means I kind of have to be reading. And I don't like reading this book. Thank you so much for watching my review. If you have any suggestions on what you want me to read next, please leave them down in the comment section below. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.